And so on behalf of my father, my brother, who also was in the Air Force and very troubled in his service, following his service, he suffered really tremendous mental health problems that were not perhaps addressed in the kind of way that they should have been by the Veterans Services. And he ended up dying when he was just a young man, only about 27 years old. I share this with you because I think that sometimes for those of us who have not been strong supporters of our engagement in either Iraq or Afghanistan or the conduct of our foreign policy, I believe that there are times when people greatly misunderstand that and substitute this idea of patriotism with the connection to war. And so I want to separate that, and I want to tell you and share with you that I believe that I, a very strong and vocal opponent of our engagement in Iraq and Afghanistan, am a great patriot. And like you, I am proud to be a patriot, and I think that the greatest way that we can express our patriotism and our regard for those who serve and those who sacrifice is by making absolutely certain that the people who make decisions about war and peace and who serves and who doesn't, are made in a responsible and a respectful kind of way. Thank you. In a responsible and respectful kind of way. And I think that it's important then for those of us who share a vision for peace and productive engagement in the world that we unite ourselves, veterans and non-veterans, mothers and fathers and servicemen and women, supporting efforts for peace around the world. And so I want to talk with you a little bit about what it's been like to be in the United States Congress these days. This is a new world for me. I'd never held elective office before. I think before I ran the first time for Congress, my last election was 11th grade class president when my father was stationed at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But that was instructive. 11th grade was very instructive. And so was kindergarten. I want to say to you, though, that I think that there are many, really tremendous people who inhabit the halls of Congress. And sometimes people get, shifted off into a direction, or there becomes a level of groupthink that many of us who've been outside of Congress don't quite understand. And so I want to share with you how that groupthink has played out when it comes to our engagement in Iraq and Afghanistan. First, we had the groupthink with respect to Iraq, in which we heard on one hand from the administration about the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction that were imminently going to be used against the United States and against the Western world. Then we heard the groupthink around what needed to happen as a result of that. And because there was so much thinking alike and not quite as much questioning, many of us know today that we went down a path that had some just stepped back and asked the right questions and probed a little bit more deeply and even read the intelligence reports. It's pretty clear that we may not have engaged in Iraq in that kind of way at all. Now that's hindsight, but now let's move forward to where we are now with Afghanistan. I think that there's a lot of groupthink going on with Afghanistan as well. And while our engagement in Afghanistan is markedly different in terms of its initiation from our engagement in Iraq, there are a lot of very similar things going on. And I'll share this with you. A few months ago, I guess it was early in January or February, Secretary Gates wrote an article that probably few people read. It was in a foreign policy magazine, and he made an argument about Afghanistan that suggested that indeed, in order to make Afghanistan work, that it would require a long-term, perhaps decades-long commitment in Afghanistan that was far more about what needed to happen on the civilian and civil society side in Afghanistan than it was about the military. And yet, here we are, we move forward to a supplemental appropriations bill to fund the effort, the stepped up, ramped up effort in Afghanistan that I think is, we've moved toward largely as a result of a set of promises and dialogue during a campaign process that now require us to govern based on those promises. And in fact, the commitment that we made on the supplemental appropriations bill provided about 90% support for military and about 10% support for the very thing that our now Secretary Gates says is what is really required for Afghanistan. Now, I'm not going to argue one way or another that we should and need to make that decades-long commitment, couple of decade commitment. But I will tell you this, if we choose to do that, then the American people have to be fully engaged in what that means and what that commitment is about. And instead, we've been told in the media, we've been told by the administration, frankly, that indeed our commitment in Afghanistan is sort of a short-term military operation, 18 to 24-month military operation. There is not a single credible source, either in this country or around the world, who believes that to be true. And yet, we